Hello, lovely people. This is Professor Matt, and this is the end of the season, Eastern Europe short. Right. As promised, we're going to recap the Croatian and Ukrainian leagues. I'm going to forgo talking about the leagues that are on the spring autumn calendar. So we'll catch up with Kazakhstan and Belarus sometime probably in July, right? When those leagues have reached their sort of midway point. I figured I'd record sort of a, half season recap plus a preview for the upcoming Ukrainian Premier League, right? Because they get started, I believe, that last week of July, right? Because they have the long winter break. So yeah, why don't we get this started? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recap the Croatian League real quick. The Ukrainian Premier League took a little bit about three Ukrainian players who might get moved during this transfer window coming up. And I'm going to talk about three weird stories, right? Because Eastern European football is, well, it's great for weird stories. And so I decided to just, throw out my three favorites that occurred this season. So without further ado, the Croatian League wrapped up this week. And right, Dinamo Zagreb, who I was told this was the year that, they were finally going to get their pockets picked, wind up with a double. They finished first with automatic Champions League qualification, and they won the Croatian Cup during the week, 3-1 over Rijeka. Uh, in terms of the rest of the table, Rijeka finished second, so that's automatic Europa League qualification. And then Hajduk does get European football. They're going to be automatic Conference League, and fourth place, Ojek, is going to be in the Conference League playoffs. So, right, those are your four teams in Croatia. They'll be playing in Europe next year. Ukraine. So, yeah, when we last spoke, it was the week before the Shakhtar Dynamo Kiev match. Things did not go well for my boys. They conceded a rather stupid early penalty and lost the match 1-0. So Shakhtar wins the league. And indeed, they also did the double, uh, prevailing in the cup, which was played last Wednesday. Uh, the league positions, 1 through 5. So Shakhtar is automatic UCL group stage. Dynamo Kiev, who finished second, a little bit more about them in a second, uh, is guaranteed at the very least Europa League football. They will go into the Champions League playoff. I think it's the final round. Uh, right, Kiribati, who again were on top of the league at the winter break time, but then faded, finished third. So that's automatic Europa League qualification. And then Dnipro and Policia Zimotor both get Conference League. In terms of promotion and relegation, so uh, the teams that are automatically relegated, Minial, which I call the being the season, I should add, and Metalist Kharkiv, which I was a little surprised about, especially, but they just collapsed down the stretch. And then automatic promotion from the Pashaya Liga, Kaparti Lviv, watch my last update, my feelings about them, and Hinowelts, who look, they got relegated last season, but they have some pedigree in the UPL. And right, they were playing European football a couple of years ago. So, a team of note. It's good to have them back in the league. In terms of the playoffs, right, because the two bottom teams get automatically relegated, and then the next two play 3 and 4 from the Pashaya Liga. Those will be occurring this week, so the last week of May. And right, so you have Velis taking on Kemaldets Podolski. I don't really know anything about Kemaldets Podolski. It's a lovely little city with some, beautiful architecture. But in terms of the football club, these are mystery men to me. I have no idea. And then Obalon, that's right, Beer. Beer still has life, and they're going to be playing Lvivi Brave Kiev. That's right, another club from Kiev. Uh, this is a relatively recent club. They were only formed in 2007. So the fact that they're in the promotion relegation playoff is kind of sort of a big deal. Excuse me, 2017, not 2007. Is sort of a big deal. But I think Obalon will be safe. And I have to be honest, I think both UPL squads survive. Right. So before I get to, some Ukrainian players that could be on the move, and these are, by the way, not just guys from Ukraine. They're Ukrainians playing in one league. A little bit about my boys. And right, there was a title race up until that, match against Shakhtar. But I'll say this. And I'll say more about this obviously during the preview, and we'll see what happens during the transfer window. By and large, second place, particularly the way the season, you can't, if you're a Dynamo Kiev fan, you can't be mad about how this season wrapped up, right? The geriatric Romanian man, Luhescu, he's gone. Right. And hey, thank you. Uh, Guy won us our first league title since 2016, a couple years ago. He stopped Shakhtar from doing five in a row, won the cup twice. But, we knew this was sort of a band-aid. I mean, he was in his late 70s when we hired him. The hire was always seemingly desperation. It was a band-aid. It was, WD-40. And it was decent WD-40 until it wasn't. So he is finally gone. And right, we begin a new era with club legend and now permanent manager Alexander Shovkovsky. Shovkovsky's record since taking over for Luhescu, because we started the season bad. Now, was that all Luhescu's fault? No, we had a fair amount of injuries, etc. A lot of young players who were just getting bedded in. But since taking over for Luhescu, Shovkovsky's record is 17 wins, two draws, and one loss. And that was that match against Shakhtar where, look, if there isn't a stupid foul in the box, that probably ends 0-0. Uh, this is a good team, and there's a lot of reasons to be excited. There's a lot of young talent. Uh, Václav Vanat, Brozhatko, Alexander Tarashenko, Alexander Yatsuk, Anton Bol, etc., to supplement some of the sort of more, senior players who, again, are still pretty young. Dennis Popov is only 24. You know, Mikhail Shaparenko, even though it seems like he's been there forever, he's still only 26. So, like, this is a relatively young squad. It's a very talented squad. And, right, we'll see what happens during the summer transfer window because I don't think there's that much separating them and Shakhtar up top. And, right, we'll see what happens and who is added, who is subtracted. But, I feel cautiously optimistic going into next season. Maybe not so much in terms of Europe, but at least, not just competing for, but potentially winning the league. Transfers or potential transfers. And so we'll start with a guy who, plays in the UPL. Arguably the player of the season. And for a guy who's 21 years old, that's saying a lot. Jorge Sudakov, uh, 21-year-old, versatile midfielder, can play the 10, can play the 8, can even play the 6 in the double pivot. Uh, Burst onto the scene a year ago. His goal scoring numbers actually are slightly down from last year, but he had slightly more assists. So he wound up with 10 goals, 6 assists, and he missed time this year too via injury. Uh, he is the jewel in Shakhtar's crown. I know when we talk about Shakhtar, we usually think about young Brazilians, but because of the war, because of financial constraints, they've done a much better job of recruiting and promoting local homegrown talent. And this guy really is the flagship of that. I guess him and, Mikhailo Mudryk. But I'll keep it real. I still think Mudryk's going to come good. There's real talent there. But when he made the move to Chelsea, if you recall, me and Chelsea Mike spoke about this. I've watched the guy for a couple of years, and I said, look, he's still very raw, particularly in terms of his finishing. Sudakov is, even though they play two separate positions, in my opinion, is further along in his development than Mudryk was when he made his move. And so I think it's going to be very tempting for Shakhtar, who, like all Ukrainian squads, because of the constraints of, the invasion, need cash. Uh, I think it's going to be very tempting uh, to move him on this summer, and he's in demand. Rumors are that Newcastle, Chelsea, although I'm not certain with their financial fair play situations, if that's reasonable. Arsenal, and I think this guy would fit Arsenal like a glove. I think he, in a year or so, could do what I think they thought Havertz could do. Uh, or can do approximation of that. Right. In terms of his style of play, Arsenal would be a good fit. Uh, Real Madrid is a dark horse in so much that they're going to be losing Modric, and I think this guy could be a long-term Modric replacement. He reminds me a lot of Alexis McAllister. That's who his game reminds me of. And right, from what I understand, there is a release clause in his contract. It's a hefty one. It's 86 mil. But this guy is super talented. And if he has a good Euros, which I think he will, because I think Ukraine's going to have a good Euros, more about that maybe in a week or so. Uh, you know, I wouldn't be shocked if a team in the West triggers that release clause. Speaking of big Euros and release clauses, there are also two Ukrainian players who I saw, in the league. One guy, former Dynamo Kiev man, uh, who were major parts of Girona's strong league campaign in Spain. Artem Djobic, the leading goal scorer in La Liga, by the way, 22 league goals, 24 in all comps. Uh, he's really goddamn good. He scores goals. Right. I vaguely remember him coming up through the old Dnipropetrovsk academy, but he was on that Midtjylland team that played Liverpool in the Champions League in the group stages years ago. Uh, right. But then, he was loaned out to Midtjylland, came back to Dnipro, and I don't know, something clicked. He just started scoring goals for fun, and he hasn't stopped. And right, so, and the thing is, he's not just scoring goals at the club level. He's going to be leading the line for the Ukrainian national team at the Euros, barring injury or something weird. And right, he doesn't just score goals for the national team, he scores important goals. This is the guy who scored the winner against Sweden 4 years ago at the Euros. He scored the winner against Scotland in the playoff. He scored the winner against Iceland in the qualification playoff for these Euros. So, dude doesn't just score goals, he scores important goals. And right, he's a guy who he's a little older, he's 25, who I think can go to England or Germany and make an immediate impact because he's done it in a big league already. Who does he remind me of? Physically, he's one of those clone clones of Artem Zhuba, right? The big Russian striker, played for Zenit, Spartak, Russian national team. Big dude, one of the quote unquote heroes of that Russian team in 2018. He's of a similar, ilk, but I think he's better. He's certainly better than Juba was when Juba was this age. And I think long term he can be better than Juba because Juba, when he first came up, was just big and like fast. He was pace and power personified. Jobic's a little different, right? he's really figured out how to use his size to his advantage. His hold-up play is quite good, and he's not just a traditional big man striker. He can do sort of that false nine kind of thing. He's sort of a homeless person's, Harry Kane, dare I say. And so clubs, let's say in England, they're looking for strikers. Okay, I mentioned Kane. Tottenham, right? He's an upgrade over Richarlison. Chelsea, they still need a striker, although again, can they afford him? Who are they going to sell off? I hate to say it, Arsenal, right? He would single-handedly solve a lot of Arsenal's problems, and he's probably cheaper than Ivan. Well, he's definitely going to be cheaper than Ivan Toney. And I'm going to throw Liverpool out there as well because Arne Slot is not beholden to Darwin Nunez. I like Darwin Nunez, but I struggle with Darwin Nunez. Whether we keep Darwin or we let him go, especially if we let him go, Artem Jovic wouldn't be a bad replacement and or foil. He's big, he's fast like Darwin, but he's way more clinical. And unlike Nunez, he doesn't live offside. So, and look, Nunez at Benfica when he really broke through, he was part of a sort of not either a tandem. He was rotated heavily actually with weirdly enough another Ukrainian striker, Roman Yaremchuk. Even if we keep Nunez, I wouldn't mind Jovic. And the thing is, he can be had for not that much money. He has a release clause, 40 mil, which in today's market, particularly for strikers, is so, any team, not just in England, they're looking for a gunman this summer. You could do way worse than Artem Jovic. And then the last player I want to talk about is my boy, Victor Tashankov. Also at Girona, had had a pretty good season, all things considered. He got hurt at the end of October and he missed about 2.5 months. So his numbers aren't as good as they probably should have been. Really, really versatile forward. He's a natural right winger, but he can play all over the front line. Kind of if I had to again make a comparison, sort of like Diego Jota, can cover left wing, right wing. He could be a center forward. He can do, if you play two up front, he can be a support striker. Uh, 8 goals and 7 assists in the league. Not, great numbers, but at the same time, you have to factor in the injury. But this guy, I mean, former Dynamo Kiev player, when he was at Dynamo, we saw him as the new Yarmolenko, and indeed, he was the best player in the league uh, for at least 2 or 3 years running, and instrumental in that league title that we won under Luhescu, a couple years ago. The shine on him has kind of gone a little bit. His career seems to, hit a crossroads, but then he made the move to Spain, and he's still only 26. And here's the deal. Someone needs to cover that right side for the Ukrainian national team this summer. Yarmolenko, from what I understand, is going to be in the Ukraine squad, but he's 30 freaking 7 years old, right? So someone's going to need to spell him. They need somebody else. And, right, you'd figure Modric would cover the left, but is he really a nailed on starter? I'm not certain. As much as I like him, I'm not certain. If Tashankov has a good Euros, he has a big Euros, I would not be shocked if he is also moved in the summer. So some names worth keeping an eye on. So before we call it a short, I want to do this because like one of the cool things about following the game in Eastern Europe is because of the sort of institutional dysfunction that is the post-socialist space, you get some weird stories. Right. We've talked about some of these on the pod. So I was like, okay, so if I'm gonna do a, season wrap up video, let me pick my three weirdest stories. And so I'm gonna go from three to one. And then real briefly before I check out, just some just general updates of what to expect from me uh in the upcoming week. So the first one is titled in my notes simply Liga Warszawa fans. Liga Warszawa, Legion Warsaw, the big club in the Polish capital. Look, Poland has a sort of ultra hooligan problem. Right. And my people have a tendency to not just not travel well, but to play with pyrotechnics. It's a thing in Poland. So Leon Vashava was in the Conference League this past season, and their fans earned them a closed door uh, ban in March, a ban on their fans. Only geriatrics and kids under the age of 14 could go see this knockout stage match against Moldal. Uh, like an associates club in March. Well, why? Well, both at home and away, Warsaw fans, Warsaw fans, uh, they beat the crap out of Aston Villa fans, and in the away leg, the leg in Warsaw, they stole their banners and their signs, and then like had them out there as trophies during the following weekend's league match. They also in the Netherlands lit a Dutch cop on fire. Right. So the one match ban was earned. I will give Liga Warsaw fans credit. And we talked about this, I think, privately on the what in the WhatsApp chat. So there's a ban, there's old people, there's little kids, and right, that portion of the stadium where the ultras normally sit were cordoned off. I don't know how they did this. I assume the stewards were in on it, right? Uh, that portion of the stadium was cordoned off, but they just snuck into another portion of the stadium. And right before the match kicked off, unveiled a giant banner which read in English and Polish, by the way, "Surprise mother effer." Uh that's incredible. That's incredible. You shouldn't light Dutch cops on fire or, fight dudes from Birmingham and steal their shit, but that's pretty remarkable. Weird story number two. Quincy Promise, cocaine. And right, I'm kind of breaking our taboo about not talking about Russian football, but we have to here. Quincy Promise, dude of note. Uh, you know, young Dutch player, made his name at Spartak Moscow, was the Russian Premier League Young Player of the Season, was the Player of the Season twice. Instrumental, absolutely instrumental in Spartak winning their first league title in something like, you know, I think 20 years, about 15 or 16 years in 2017. Easily the best player on that team. And right, a guy of note too. He was, the following season he got his dream transfer to Ajax. He was on that Ten Hag Ajax team that took Tottenham to the limit in the Champions League. Was on the Dutch national team in a couple major tournaments. Like guy of note. But a couple years ago, he left the Eredivisie and went back to the RPL. And look, from what I understand, he did enjoy his time in the RPL. He is a cult hero in Moscow, especially among Spartak fans. But it was kind of a weird transfer because it was like this seems like a step backwards. And again, guys, at the time the guy was still in his late 20s. It's like, you still can play really good football. Shortly after that transfer, reports came out of the Netherlands, and this is December 2020, that man stabbed his cousin. Well, kind of weird, right? Normally you have beef, sometimes you have beef with relatives, but shanking them, not usually the first course of action. So that was weird. Those charges were dropped. But again, it raises some red flags. Like, why did you stab your cousin? This January, that first story, that first, you know, bout of legal issues got some context. The reason you stabbed your cousin is because your cousin was in on your drug smuggling business. And when I say drug smuggling, I don't mean, oh, you went on international duty and you picked up some stuff for your homies. No. Quincy Promise allegedly moved 1.3 metric tons of cocaine through the port of Amsterdam. I'm going to repeat that because I think it bears repeating. A professional soccer player moved and was in charge of, like he was the big boss, 1.3 metric tons of cocaine. That's all the cocaine. This French connection shit through the port of Amsterdam with intent to distribute, right? Because you don't need, no one needs that much cocaine. Thing is, man's back in Russia, and look, no one talks to Russia anymore. And right, Russia doesn't really have extradition treaties with any Western country even before this. So that explains why he probably went back to Shakhtar. He stabbed up his cousin, and it's like, I might want to get the hell out of Dodge and go to a place where I'm comfortable, and I know that they cannot get me. And so, he's found guilty of these charges. Excuse me, he's charged with this, uh, but nothing can be done, right? He's in Putin land. There's a lot of questionable judgment, but Quincy Promise might be like he's a dumb bastard because it gets weirder, right? The following month, because right, the RPL does the winter break thing, so usually RPL teams play winter sort of pre second half of the season friendlies in places with warmer climates. Turkey before the invasion was the big spot. Now it's the Gulf, the Middle East. So Spartak did a preseason tour in the United Arab Emirates, and the UAE does have an extradition treaty with the Netherlands. So if I'm Quincy Promise, I say to whoever the manager at Spartak is now, shows you how much I follow that league at this point. Or stop following that league. If I was Quincy Promise, I would have gone to the manager and been like, "Hey, man, hey, I got some legal issues. Uh, I'm gonna skip out on preseason. I'll train here in Moscow. When you all come back, look, if I have to miss the first 2 or 3 matches after the winter break, cool. But I'm not going on no goddamn plane. Right, because he can't be touched in Russia. What did Quincy Promise do? He got on that goddamn plane. And before he was going to get on another plane to get him back to Russia, the local authorities arrested him. And indeed, he is going to be extradited back to the Netherlands to face trial. So Quincy Promise, crazy, 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 and stupid. Just plain, just stupid. And finally, and I have to thank Chelsea Mike for this because we don't talk about Romanian football. I'll talk a little bit about the national team and something I'm preparing, but we don't talk about the Romanian league in on this podcast. Easily the strangest story out of Eastern Europe this season came out of Romania. And this is the most recent because this broke only a couple weeks ago. So Dinamo Bucharest signed last summer ex-Barcelona man Edgar. Right. And I vaguely remember him at Barcelona. He's also played like everywhere. He's been in the Netherlands, Portugal, Turkey, etc. So they signed him. And then about a month or two ago, Edgar's performances just dropped. Right. He went from being one of the better defenders in the league to being a liability. And according to reports from inside, their training ground and the dressing room, he lost the ability to speak English. right? Because he doesn't know any Romanian, and why should he? He's Brazilian, right? Uh, and right, the manager doesn't speak Portuguese, but the two could communicate in English because both had a pretty decent, handling of it. So all of a sudden, this guy becomes bad, and he speaks no English. So Edgar has a twin brother, an identical twin brother, in fact, by the name of Eldinho, who was playing in the Polish league until his contract expired in December and he was without club. According to reports out of Romania, Edgar, I guess feeling sorry for his brother, I don't know, switched roles with him. And right in those matches where, his performances dipped and apparently he couldn't speak English, couldn't understand English, that was not Edgar out there. That was Dino. Right? So that's kind of not like that's actually psychotic, where you have a guy who, again, his rationale for this is mysterious. Does he feel sorry for his brother? Did he just want to chill? I was like, no, I don't want to play those matches. But my brother looks exactly like me. He'll just show up and play, right? Uh, this is a profoundly strange story. And again, sort of one of those stories that, look, this is why we love Eastern European football because of stuff like this, right? You wouldn't hear something like this coming out of Spain or England, uh, but Romania, yeah, yeah, yeah. The guy pulls a switcheroo. So that whole Edgar Eldinho Dinamo Bucharest story is my coach Professor Matt's personal weird Eastern European story of the season, beating out Quinty Promise Cocaine and, Liga Warszawa fans. So that is it. Like I said, I'm probably going to do a mid-season Kazakhstan Belarus update in July when those, leagues are, at the sort of midway point. And I'll couple that with a Ukrainian Premier League preview for the upcoming season. Uh, in terms of what else is on the pipeline, I'm not certain when we're all going to be reconvening. But the first of my historical, uh, you know, pieces for the Euros is in the can. I'm probably going to be recording my second one, pretty soon. So those should be up. I'm thinking either before either the week before the tournament starts or the week the tournament starts. And then again, because I'm not certain when we're all going to be together, I am going to, in this upcoming week, probably, so it will probably be up a week before the Euros start, record a separate Euros vid previewing all the Central and Eastern European teams. And there's quite a number of them. So I'll, give you a rundown of what to expect or what I think we can realistically expect, players to watch, key players, etc. So keep your eyes out for that. Anyway, gang, this is Professor Matt, and this is the Too Many Guys Soccer Show. Peace it.